Hello. So something weird happened. For some reason there's some sort of copyright and I don't know how. I'm texting Shiv about it right now. I don't know what I possibly could have done to be copyrighted on. So there was no music playing and there's no video except for me. Um So I don't know what happened, but hopefully it was a one-time thing. Looks like I've got my two little friends back. Uh, but I don't know what I don't know what happened. I'm very confused. I know, right? It just stopped me. It said that I had to start a new stream. So I don't know. um, I don't think I hope I'm not getting sued. It just like I'll look at it later, but for some reason it didn't like something that I did. I don't think so because it started before I like somebody. If this is the first time they've figured this out, like this is public. These books are public domain. They can't. I don't think they can do anything to me. I could be wrong. But anyways, it's only what we deserve. Let's get started with the summary of what happened yesterday in a long chapter. What? Oh my gosh. So Isabella shows up at Nellie's door. She's like, Nellie, you have to help me. I have come here from Wuthering Heights. I am going to Gimmerton Town. I just need you to get me some of my old clothes. And Nellie's like, why don't you just stay? And she's like, you know what? I think that Heathcliff will follow me here, but I'm pretty sure if I just run somewhere else in England, I can be free. Well, I said it wasn't for children, so I mean, someone would have to be actively. I don't think anyone's copyrighted the F word yet, but I'm sure Disney's going to get there eventually. um, this is it's the FBI. They've come for me. uh, but anyway, so Nellie comes. She's like, "You have to get me out. You can't let me stay here." And she says, like, Heathcliff basically almost killed Hindley last night. Hindley locked him out, and Heathcliff was like, "Bitch, let me in." And then Hindley has this like weird gun knife thing, and tried to stab Heathcliff with it, but Heathcliff stabbed him back. And then Hindley almost bleeds out. Nellie's like, "I can't do this." I think that's pretty much. I actually don't think that she's left yet. I don't think that she's left yet. But she's like, anyways, I was just so upset about this. So, excuse me. Let's do it. It is so warm. It's just, there's going to be a bead of sweat trickling down my face at some point during this. Maybe it's time to bring out the fan. Bring out the fan. Okay. I already have a fan on too. Like, this is just double duty. Okay, let's do it. Hopefully this isn't affecting anything. Is my computer going to die? We'll find out. A stream of unfortunate events. Okay. Fie, miss, I interrupted. One might suppose you had never opened a Bible in your life. If God afflict your enemies, surely that ought to suffice you. It is both mean and presumptuous to add your torture to his. In general, I'll allow it would be, Ellen, she continued, but what misery laid on Heathcliff could content me, unless I have a hand in it. I'd rather he suffered less, if I might cause his sufferings, and he might know that I was the cause. Oh, I owe him so much. On only one condition I can hope to forgive him. It is, if I may take an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, for every wrench of agony, return a wrench, reduce him to my level. As he was the first to injure, make him the first to implore pardon. And then, why, Ellen, I might show you some generosity, but it is utterly impossible. I can ever be revenged, and therefore I cannot forgive him. Hindley wanted some water, and I handed him a glass and asked him how he was. Not as ill as I wish, he replied, but leaving out my arm, every inch of me is sore as if I had been fighting with a legion of imps. Oh no, Jean. um, uh, I'd like to shift your comment. Did you see I have a wrench now? Um, Loyal supporters are receive a wrench. um, mm, oh nuts! I lost my place. Yes, no wonder, was my next remark. Catherine used to boast that she stood between you and bodily harm. She meant that certain persons would not hurt you for fear of offending her. Oh shit. Never mind. This is still. uh, Patricia still has a wrench, but Patricia's in Spain. So I can give it. I am able to give and rescind wrenches. So basically, it's 12 midnight for Patricia, so she can't always come, and also she's really behind, according to her. Maybe I will rescind the wrench. The wrench, only one wrench at a time. Okay, where am I? Okay, yes, no wonder, was my next remark. Catherine used to boast that she stood between you and bodily harm. She meant that certain persons would not hurt you for fear of offending her. It's well people don't really rise from their graves, or last night she might have witnessed a repulsive scene. Are not you bruised and cut over your chest and shoulders? I can't say, he answered, but what do you mean? Did he dare strike me when I was down? He trampled on and kicked you and dashed you on the ground, I whispered, and his mouth watered to tear you with his teeth, because he's only half a man, not so much. Dane has no wrench. Mr. Earnshaw looked out like me to the countenance of our mutual foe, who, absorbed in his anguish, seemed insensible to anything around him. The longer he stood, the plainer his reflections revealed their blackness through his features. Oh, God! Oh, if God would give me the strength to strangle him in my last agony, I'd go to hell with joy, groaned the impatient man, writhing to rise and sinking back in despair, convinced of his inadequacy for the struggle. Nay, it's enough that he has murdered one of you, I observed aloud. At the Grange, everyone knows your sister would have been living now, had it not been for Mr. Heathcliff. After all, it is preferable to be hated than loved by him. When I recollect how happy we were, how happy Catherine was before he came, I'm fit to curse the day. Most likely, Heathcliff noticed more the truth of what was said than the spirit of the person who said it. His attention was roused, I saw, for his eyes rained down tears among the ashes, and he drew his breath in suffocating sighs. I stared full at him, and laughed scornfully. The clouded windows of hell flashed a moment towards me. The fiend which usually looked out, however, was so dimmed and drowned that I did not fear to hazard another sound of derision. Get up and be gone out of my sight, said the monster. I guessed he uttered those words at least through his voice, though his voice was hardly intelligible. I beg your pardon, I replied, but I loved Catherine too, and her brother requires attendance which, for her sake, I shall supply. Now that she's dead, I see her in Hindley. Hindley has exactly her eyes, and if you had not tried to gouge them out and made them black and red, and her— Get up, wretched idiot, before I stamp you to death, he cried, making a wretched movement. Sorry, I don't know why I put wretched in there. Making a movement that caused me to make one also. But then, I continued, holding myself ready to flee, if poor Catherine had trusted you and assumed the ridiculous, contemptible, degrading title of Mrs. Heathcliff, she would soon have presented a similar picture. She wouldn't have borne your abominable behavior quietly, and detestation and disgust must have found a voice. The back and the settle of Earnshaw's person interposed between me and him, so instead of endeavoring to reach me, he snatched a dinner knife from the table and flung it at my head. It struck beneath my ear and stopped the sentence I was uttering. Oh my God! And pulling it out, ah! I sprang to the door and delivered another which I hope went a little deeper than his missile. The last glimpse I caught of him was a furious rush on his part, checked by the embrace of his host, and both fell locked together on the hearth. In my flight through the kitchen, I bid Joseph speed to his master. I knocked over Hareton, who was hanging a litter. Oh my God, who was hanging a litter of puppies from a chair back in the doorway, and blessed as a soul escaped from purgatory, I bounded, leaped, and flew down the steep road, then quitting its windings, shot direct across the moor, rolling over banks and wading through marshes, precipitating myself, in fact, towards the beacon light of the Grange. As far rather I would be condemned to a perpetual dwelling in the infernal regions, than even for one night abide beneath the roof of Wuthering Heights again. Isabella ceased speaking and took a drink of tea. Then she rose, and bidding me put on her bonnet and a great shawl I had brought, and turning a deaf ear to my entreaties for her to remain another hour, she stepped onto a chair, kissed Edgar's and Catherine's portraits, bestowed a similar salute on me, and descended to the carriage accompanied by Fanny, who yelped wild with joy at recovering her mistress. Is Fanny a dog? I don't know. She was driven away, never to revisit this neighborhood, but a regular correspondence was established between her and my master when things were more settled. I believe her new abode was in the south, near London. There she had a son born a few months subsequent her escape. He was christened Linton, and from the first she reported him to be an ailing, peevish creature. Oh, she got out. She's out. She's out. She made it. Let's all set off a firework. Isabella Linton made it out. She did not come back. Mr. Heathcliff, meeting me one day in the village, inquired where she lived. I refused to tell. Good. He remarked that it was not of any moment, only she must beware of coming to her brother. She should not be with him if he had to keep her himself. Though I would give no information he discovered through some of the other servants, both her place of residence and the existence of the child. No! Still, he didn't molest her, for which forbearance she might thank his aversion, I suppose. He often asked about the infant when he saw me, and on hearing its name smiled grimly and observed, "They wish me to hate it too, do they? Good Lord." "I don't think they wish you to know anything about it," I answered. "Not everything is about you." "But I'll have it," he said, "when I want it. They may reckon on that. Yuck. Oh no. Fortunately, would we say continuing sentence was fortunate? Fortunately, its mother died before the time arrived, some 13 years after the decease of Catherine, when Linton was 12 or a little more. Fortunately. On the day succeeding Isabella's unexpected visit, I had no opportunity of speaking to my master. He shunned the conversation and was fit for discussing nothing. When I could get him to listen, I saw it pleased him that his sister had left her husband, whom he abhorred with an intensity which the mildness of his nature would scarcely seem to allow. So deep and sensitive was his aversion that he refrained from going anywhere where he was likely to see or hear of Heathcliff. Grief, and that together, transformed him into a complete hermit. He threw up his office of magistrate, ceased even to attend church, avoided the village on all occasions, and spent a life of entire seclusion within the limits of his park and grounds, only varied by solitary rambles on the moors and visits to the grave of his wife, mostly at evening or early morning before other wanderers were abroad. But he was too good to be thoroughly unhappy long. He didn't pray for Catherine's soul to haunt him. Time brought resignation and a melancholy sweeter than common joy. He recalled her memory with ardent, tender love, and hopeful, aspiring to the better world, where he doubted not she was gone. And he had earthly consolation and affections too, also. For a few days, I said, he seemed regardless of the puny successor to the departed. That coldness melted as fast as snow in April. And ere the tiny thing could stammer a word or totter a step, it wielded a despot's scepter in his heart. It was named Catherine, but he never called it the name in full, as he had never called the first Catherine short. probably because Heathcliff had a habit of doing so. The little one was always Cathy. It formed to him a distinction from the mother, and yet a connection with her. And his attachment sprang from its relation to her, far more than from its being his own. I used to draw a comparison between him and Hindley Earnshaw, and perplex myself to explain satisfactorily why their conduct was so opposite in similar circumstances. They had both been fond husbands, and were both attached to their children, and I could not see how they shouldn't both have taken the same road, for good or evil. But I thought in my mind Hindley, with apparently the stronger head, had shown himself sadly the worse and the weaker man. When his ship struck, the captain abandoned his post, and the crew, instead of trying to save her, rushed into riot and confusion, leaving no hope for their luckless vessel. Linton, on the contrary, displayed the true courage of a loyal and faithful soul. He trusted God, and God comforted him. One hoped, and the other despaired. They chose their own lots, and were righteously doomed to endure them. But you'll not want to hear my moralizing, Mr. Lockwood. You'll judge as well as I can. All these things, at least, you'll think you will, and that's the same. The end of Earnshaw was what might have been expected. It followed fast on his sisters. There was scarcely 6 months between them. We, at the Grange, never got a very succinct account of his state preceding it. All that I did learn was on occasion of going to aid in the preparations for the funeral. Mr. Kenneth came to announce the event to my master. "Well, Nelly," said he, riding into the yard one morning too early not to alarm me with an instant presentiment of bad news. "It's yours and my turn to go into mourning at present. Who's given us the slip now, do you think?" "Who?" I asked in a flurry. "Why, guess." "Death is not a guessing game," he returned, dismounting and slinging his bridle on a hook by the door. "And nip up the corner of your apron. I'm certain you'll need it." "Not Mr. Heathcliff, surely," I exclaimed. "What? Would you have tears for him?" said the doctor. "No. Heathcliff's a tough young fellow. He looks blooming today. I've just seen him. He's rapidly regaining flesh since he lost his better half." "Well, who is it then, Mr. Kenneth?" I repeated impatiently. "Hindley Earnshaw, your old friend Hindley." I don't know why I felt the spirit took me. He replied, "and my wicked gossip, though he's been too wild for me this long while. There, I said we should draw water, but cheer up. He died true to his character. Drunk as a lord. Poor lad, I'm sorry too. One can't help missing an old companion, though he had the worst tricks with him that ever man imagined, and has done me many a rascally turn. He's barely 27, it seems. That's your own age. Who would have thought you were born in 1 year?" "I'm sorry. They're only 27? That's like, I'm 6 years away from that." Maybe that's where "Whoa, Nelly" comes from. Everybody reading this and then being like, "Nelly? Whoa, Nelly." Who's Melissa? Oh, I guess. I confess this blow was greater to me than the shock of Mr. Linton's death. Ancient associations lingered round my heart. I sat down in the porch and wept as for a blood relation, desiring Kenneth to get another servant to introduce him to the master. I could not hinder myself from pondering on the question. Had he had fair play? Whatever I did, the idea would bother me. It was so tiresomely pertinacious that I resolved on requesting to leave to go to Wuthering Heights and assist in the last duties to the dead. Mr. Linton was extremely reluctant to consent, but I pleaded eloquently for the friendless condition in which he lay, and I said my old master and foster brother had a claim on my services as his own. Besides, I reminded him that the child, Hareton, was his wife's nephew, and in the absence of nearer kin, he ought to act as its guardian, and he ought and must inquire how the property was left, and look over the concerns of his brother-in-law. I think Heathcliff is 40 at the current time of the book, so we've still got 10 years of catch-up to do in between where the book started and where we are now, because Nellie is still telling the story of how we got to Mr. Lockwood taking possession of Thrushcross. Oh God, where was I? He was unfit for attending to such matters then, but he bid me speak to his lawyer, and at length permitted me to go. His lawyer had been Earnshaw's also. I called at the village and asked him to accompany me. Excuse me. He shook his head and advised that Heathcliff should be let alone, affirming if the truth were known, Hareton would be found little else than a beggar. Oh, who's this? The lawyer? Oh.
His father died in debt, he said. The whole property is mortgaged, and the sole chance for the natural heir is to allow him an opportunity of creating some interest in the creditor's heart, that he may be inclined to deal leniently towards him.
When I reached the Heights, I explained that I had come to see everything carried on decently, and Joseph, who appeared in sufficient distress, expressed satisfaction at my presence. Mr. Heathcliff said he did not perceive that I was wanted, but I might stay and order the arrangements for the funeral if I chose. Correctly, he remarked. That fool's body should be buried at the crossroads, without ceremony of any kind. I happened to leave him 10 minutes yesterday afternoon, and in that interval he fastened the 2 doors of the house against me, and he has spent the night in drinking himself to death deliberately. We broke in this morning, for we heard him snorting like a horse, and there he was, laid over the settle, flaying and scalping. We would not have wakened him. Flaying and scalping would not have wakened him. I sent for Kenneth, and he came, but not till the beast had changed into carrion. He was both dead and cold and stark. And so you'll allow it was useless making more stir about him. The old servant confirmed this statement, but muttered, I'd rather he'd gone himself for the doctor. I should have taken to of the master better nurse him. And he weren't dead when I left. Not of the sort. I insisted on the funeral being respectable. Mr. Heathcliff said I might have my own way there too, only he desired me to remember that the money for the whole affair came out of his pocket. He maintained a hard, careless deportment, indicative of neither joy nor sorrow, if anything. It expressed a flinty gratification at a piece of difficult work, successfully executed. I observed once, indeed, something like exultation in his aspect. It was just when the people were bearing the coffin from the house. He had the hypocrisy to represent him a mourner, and previous to following with Hareton, he lifted the unfortunate child onto the table and muttered with peculiar gusto, Now, my bonny lad, you are mine, and we'll see if one tree won't grow as crooked as another, and with the same wind to twist it. The unsuspecting thing was pleased at this speech. He played with Heathcliff's whiskers and stroked his cheek, but I divined its meaning and observed tartly, That boy must go back with me to Thrushcross Grange, sir. There is nothing in the world less yours than he is. Good. Does Linton say so? He demanded. Of course. He has ordered me to take him, I replied. Well, said the scoundrel, we'll not argue on the subject now, but I have a fancy to try my hand at rearing a young one. Excuse me? Try your hand at rearing a young one? That's not the right way to approach childcare. You don't get to try. You have to do it. It's not a whoops. You gotta commit, buddy. So intimate to your master that I must supply the place of this with my own if he attempt to remove it. I don't engage to let Hareton go undisputed, but I'll be pretty sure to make the other come. Remember to tell him. This hint was enough to bind our hands. I repeated its substance on my return, and Edgar Linton, little interested at the commencement, spoke no more of interfering. I'm not aware that he could have done it to any purpose, had he been ever so willing. The guest was now the master of Wuthering Heights. He held firm possession and proved to the attorney, who, in his turn, proved it to Mr. Linton, that Earnshaw had mortgaged every yard of land he owned for cash to supply his mania for gaming, and he, Heathcliff, was the mortgagee. That feels French. Eri et montagie. Sorry, I've got to go. In that manner, Hareton, who should now be the first gentleman in the neighborhood, was reduced to a state of complete dependence on his father's inveterate enemy, and lives in his own house as a servant, deprived of the advantage of wages, and quite unable to right himself, because of his friendless and his ignorance that he has been wronged. And that's the end of that chapter. So I have a couple of questions. Isabella's Linton's child is not involved in Okay, there are 3 children. There's Hareton, who is Hindley's child. I'm going to write it down. Okay. Just prepare for my bad handwriting, everyone. Okay. So let's make a little tree. Kathy, our Kathy, Heathcliff, Cliff. I didn't do this right already. I goofed it. Fuck. I'm doing it again. We're trying again. Okay. So there's, Isabella. I didn't do it right again. Okay, there's Isabella. Whatever. We'll make it happen. Shit. I'm doing it again. Okay. I'm really passionate about this now. Okay. Edgar. Isabella. I should have left it. Isabella. Kathy. Heathcliff. Shit. This is so hard. Okay. Shit. I'm just blowing it. Okay. Let's try this one more time. Edgar, Isabella, Heathcliff, what's her face? Kathy, Hindley. Edgar and Isabella are siblings. Kathy and Hindley are blood siblings. Isabella and Heathcliff marry and produce Linton baby, Isabella's son. Did we get a first name? I don't think we have a first name. Question mark Linton. That's what we'll call him. Hindley and question mark have made Hareton Earnshaw. And Kathy and Edgar, who are linked by this extremely fucked family tree, have made Kathy, I'm going to call her Catherine because it's going to get too confusing, Catherine Linton. The only 2 characters in this book. Okay. Catherine Linton must marry. Ooh, this is twisty, and people are marrying their cousins. So Catherine. Yes. So Catherine Linton must marry Isabella and Heathcliff's child, because she definitely isn't married to Hareton. So this is what it looks like. So there's Edgar and Isabella. I had to link Kathy and Edgar this way. So somehow these two are married to their cousin, right? I froze. But the only people we know are Catherine Linton and Hareton. So something's gonna happen to Isabella's son. Wow. What a doozy. What a time to be a Heathcliff. Wow. Okay. That was today's chapter. I'm gonna log off for today. Thanks for getting through that weird thing with me. I'm gonna go rewatch that video and see, like, I don't know, what happened? Two houses not really alike in dignity. I would love to do that, but unfortunately that's really popular in classic literature. People are just like really into marrying their cousins. Because they were the only people within a 60-mile radius. If Edgar really cared, he would have moved. Okay. The secret to diversifying your gene pool is to move. Sorry. Okay. Somehow that's one of the least messed up things that's going to happen in this book. I'm going to leave now, and I hope that you will too. Or you could just stare sitting at my YouTube page for as long as you want. That's up to you. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow at 3. Hopefully I will have some plum and raspberry tart at that point in my life. And I wish and hope that you also have plum and raspberry tart at some point soon. So I bid you adieu. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Okie dokie. Bye.